Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. My name is Doug Brown, and today I'm so excited about today's episode. I really am. I've been wanting to do this when we started scheduling. I started getting excited because today we have a lady from the retail world named Chantell with us, and Chantell built one of the most amazing environments I've come across in my career. 5,000 different locations, just tons of users in a retail environment where the endpoint is not managed by, professional IT people. And she did it all with basically a half an admin. So that's what she says is required to manage this solution. A half an admin a month. I always just started stuttering when I talk about this because I'm blown away. So we're going to learn about this, about that deployment. We're going to learn a lot about retail and IT and retail, and a bit about the future, where she sees the future of IT and the future of IT and retailing going. So with no further ado, I'm so excited to share this with you. My interview with Chantell about, all that we just talked about it and a lot more. Okay, Chantell, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me. I'm really looking forward to this. I enjoyed meeting you at the Disrupt conference, and I really loved your talk there. So this is what an honor it is to have you on the show.
Oh, well, thanks, Doug. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I am too. As I just said, I am too. So but for my first question, as always, can you tell everybody who are you and what do you do? What's your goal in life? Computer-wise, right?
Oh, computer-wise, yeah. Well, my name is Chantell Comberger, and I've been in technology since, oh my goodness, well, we'll just say high school and we won't give the years. But, my longest stint was in retail, and that's really what I focus on. And I have a lot of experience and background on is the retail environment. I worked for a global Fortune 500 company for over 18 years and reported direct to the CTO and was responsible for managing teams that architected solutions and led transformation efforts of technology in over 5,000 stores and 9 configuration centers globally.
Well, we're definitely going to talk about that because that's one of the I talk about it almost daily. So I think you built one of the coolest deployments I've ever heard about in all my time. But before we get that, you mentioned retail. So that's a sort of an interesting subject, and it affects everyone out there, really, right? Can you talk a bit about your experience in retail? How did you get in it? What did you learn? Give us retail like 101 times 10.
Right. Yeah. Well, how did I get into retail? I was actually a consultant for a company doing image management and workflow, and so I happened to get involved in a bunch of different clients, and one happened to be a retailer. And at the time, they only had 500 stores. They were North America only, and they were looking for someone who could take them from a green screen to a GUI environment. And they were really leaning towards a Windows-type solution, and that was my background at the time, was really heavy Windows. And so every time I walked into this client, the atmosphere, the culture was just so invigorating. It just looks like so much fun. And I thought, I got to be there. I got to check this out. And so that's what I did. I started with this retailer. And it's history from there. I learned so much about retail in general, all the distributed environments, the limitations, the challenges that you're up against, and just operations and what it is that they're really trying to do. They really, want to use technology simply to help them sell their product and reach that customer. And so they need a solid solution and something that's reliable and secure, obviously. So, that's sort of how I got into retail and have been there and moved up through the ranks and, learned a lot about retail and in front of a ton of other retailers and just see the same commonality across everybody and what they're dealing with out there in the stores.
You got it. How is retail different than other environments? Is it?
There could be a lot of similarities, but it's kicking that cash drawer. It's making sure that device in the store is secure. You're going to want that with other avenues as well, such as like manufacturing or even your own call center, things like that. So you see a lot of it really traversing one another. But just managing all of those remote locations, you have different, especially being a global company, you have different laws and regulations and things like that you have to adhere to as well.
That's interesting. You mentioned a couple things that, one different laws and things like that. And nowadays with GDPR, I guess that's probably complicating everybody's life, right?
You got it. Exactly. Yes, indeed. And the fiscal printers, when you're up against fiscal printers in the different countries and having to integrate that into your point of sale software, makes it quite interesting.
You got it. And then just remote locations. I mean, building a LAN environment, so to speak, a LAN, right, is one challenge, but doing it for all those remote locations, especially you don't have skilled, computer people in those locations too, right?
Right. The associate, they really, that's not what they do.
That's not what they do. Yeah,
right,
they're good at something other than worried about the device.
Exactly. And then when you get in these other countries, they have these different types of green initiatives and they power off the whole mall. So when, as a retailer, you want to take advantage of the off time to do your updates or maintenance or anything in that store, or when, you've got these other countries that make sure that everything's shut off at night, it really adds to the challenge of making sure that those devices are patched and secured and updated. You got
it. So let's talk a bit about this deployment you guys built, because it is like I said, it's the reference case I talk about constantly. So I'll give what I say, and you can correct me on how I've been how I've managed it or changed it into a marketing lingo, right? But I always say iGel has a customer with 30K devices in over 5K global locations managed by one person. And then I joke and I say, but iGel told me, don't say one person, Doug, because nobody believes you. Tell them two people. But it's really one person, and they don't even log in, but maybe once or twice a month. So is that true? And two, can you describe that? How did you make that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're almost true. That one person is really less than one person, to be quite honest with you. The management, the universal management suite, which is the management console and suite that manages all of our iGels. It's incredibly resilient, along with the API or the IMI is what iGel is calling it. But we have a one-stop shop I guess, if you will, interface that we have for anybody that supports the technology in our stores. It's our device management system. And that's where they open stores, close stores. It manages our networks, our IP schemas. But it not only does that, it reduces the mundane task. It automates those tasks for us so that you take the human element out and you minimize those failure points. And so by using iGel's IMI and through this natural interface of people adding devices, removing devices, adding printers, closing stores, all of that code behind the scenes from somebody just clicking buttons is actually reaching out to our back-end services, and one being the UMS. And so as devices are being removed, those devices are being moved out of that directory and having those profiles removed and being set somewhere else. So truly, there is no one getting directly into the UMS. And then, of course, you have your firmware updates, and that is truly the only time that we ever get into the UMS. And it's funny, everybody's like, oh, hey, what's the link to the UMS? I forgot, because we are hardly ever in there when it's time to do those firmware deployments. And I got to tell you this too. I've got a long history of 18 years. We went from Windows to Fat Client Linux. I've tried so many different software distribution patching solutions for both Windows and Linux. I went with the big box brands, and I think maybe 5 different software management patching solutions, and they always failed me. It was either agent-based, and the agent would always fail, and I would have to fix the agent, or the agent consumed all the resources on the box and caused issues with the software running on there. You would push out changes, and it had a console that said, "Oh yes, we're successful," and you come in the next morning to complete chaos because, well, it really wasn't successful. So, it was just such a challenge. And I will tell you, and there's going to be skeptics, and I get it, but I've got the experience, but this is how it worked for me. Every single time I sent a firmware out utilizing the UMS, 100% success. It is amazing. The next day there wasn't any chaos. You didn't have an influx of stores calling saying my terminals are down. I mean, that is enormous to be able to have that kind of stability and reliability in a product like that.
Well, that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, and you mentioned it earlier, at the end of the day, these people are tasked with, selling something, right? And not managing IT. And it's beautiful. And I love how you kept using the word automation, because I've seen the UMS, and what iGel brings is an automation tool. You put in your policies and your procedures, and you scope that all out, you design it up, and then everything just works because it goes into an automation workflow. Right. And at that point, you're not managing things. The automation is taking place. Right. And that's, I think, the beauty of what the Germans designed is, I like to call it what the Germans designed, because that's so true.
It is true. Yeah. And again, my history, Windows, Fat Client Linux, and then finally to iGel, there's so much cost, behind the scenes. You've got a technician that's putting a device on the bench, and then he's got to configure it with an image or build from, a build server. That costs money. That's time, and then you do somewhat final configuration when it finally gets to the store. Well, with iGel, you create those rules behind the scenes, and it's a zero touch. So now I no longer need a technician to put it on the bench to do anything with it. So now I've just eliminated all those costs. I simply just ship it to the store, it plugs in, it recognizes based on rules where it is, and applies the profile.
Yeah, I love it. So I love it. So you mentioned, using the IMI, the API, right? And you guys did heavily customize what, iGel brings to market. Can you talk a bit about that? Some of the customizations you guys built.
Sure, yeah. So, funny enough, I was sitting here thinking, how many times did we call iGel for support over the 12 or so years? And I thought, my gosh, probably less than a half a dozen times. And most of those calls were, do you have a feature that I'm looking for? And, one of the features was the API and what they now call the IMI. But that's exactly what we did. Is we actually created our own API at the time to connect to UMS to remove those devices, to actually configure printers and apply those profiles. And so we did a lot of that automation through this single interface that our folks use. And we even took it a little further. That single interface, when a store calls in, hey, I've got an issue with this device, the associate or the support center wants to know what device that is, what's the IP address, can I remote control to it, is it a software issue, is it, some sort of configuration issue? And we actually built tools into this interface that automate, checking the health of a device and doing some basic troubleshooting. And even those tools utilize the IMI to dive into UMS, maybe to reconfigure a printer or something along those lines. So again, no real need to get into the UMS because of the rich API interface that it has.
Very interesting. I love your story. So earlier you mentioned limitations and challenges relating to, just building networks in general, especially retail. Can you maybe discuss some of the limitations and challenges, and then, of course, how your deployment overcame those?
Sure. Well, when I first started, I mentioned I came on board to really create this Windows based GUI solution, and I didn't know any better, so we bought commodity hardware. We installed a heavy Windows operating system. To lock it down, you just couldn't reduce the size of Windows. You couldn't, take away packages like you can with Linux to really customize that heavy OS. And then, of course, you've got all the licensing cost of Windows and managing Windows. And then the software management solutions to manage that. It's heavy, it's agent-based, it's expensive. And look, I'm going to be honest with you, patching Windows, we didn't. So the first handful of years that we had Windows out there, of course, we had good intentions. We thought we could do it. Yeah, we just couldn't. And then, tracking the assets, IP management was done with an Excel spreadsheet. And then as time went on, our support increased. The commodity hardware, when you're in retail, you don't have a lot of real estate space at the cash wrap. So you're sticking this hardware in a non-ventilated cabinet. So if you have commodity hardware, it's overheating, and something that would typically last 3 years by sitting on a desktop really only lasts about a year. So we started seeing, our increase in calls to support these devices, climb, and then of course our depot and repair costs climb as well. And here's another thing when it comes to security. In order to support that device and try to troubleshoot, we actually had to give administrative rights to the associate. And so you're basically broadcasting, hey, here's how to get into administration. And then, they would be able to unlock the lockdown that you've done. And then from there, we went to Linux, and we really started to do some automation and lightweight OS. And so we started to head in the right direction. And then even then, we're still on commodity hardware. It's still difficult to manage and standardize that operating system. But not only that, now security is putting the onus on me to ensure that I'm providing them audits. I'm making sure that, everything's patched. And it's a lot for a really small IT shop to have to manage all the requirements from security, especially when you're rolling your own, if you will. So truly, we took what we did right, which was which was going in the direction of Linux, a lot of the automation by being able to work with Linux, and we said we need to make this better, right? It's the endpoint. We need to simplify that endpoint. We've got a highly distributed environment. Our bandwidth at our sites are just variable. And we have thousands of sites and 15,000 plus devices at the time of this to run our point of sale system on. So we really, and to top it off, we had to shift the management weight and vulnerability off that endpoint, because as it being a fat client, well, I've got my intellectual property on that device, not to mention data, right? So I don't want it to be on that device anymore. I need to shift that centrally to ensure that, my data, my intellectual property is secure. And so we actually brought in a bunch of solution providers, and we listened to the dog and pony show, and boy, I could go on for probably a good hour about that dog and pony show. Let me just tell you. But long story short, we decided on iGel. iGel software really was lightweight, easy to manage, definitely reliable and scalable, and it was the right thing to deploy. Not to mention, it really did help with pulling back our data and reducing our complexity and our risk, as well as on the plus side, we also went with the hardware, so it really helped us with our green initiative as well. So we really reduced our costs from our electrical bills for sure. But just by getting that out in one of our brands, I will tell you, shortly thereafter, we had a big deployment. It was based on a commercial time frame, and if it wasn't for that foundation that we set, we would have never been able to make and meet the commitment of commercializing the solution that was going into those stores. And that environment was so flexible that it allowed us just to simply drop this new solution, this new application, and launch it from the iGels. And literally that in and of itself, just being so flexible, allowed us to save over $10 million on that one particular project.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I wanted to ask you about the applications, because you guys do something I wouldn't say, sort of a little bit non-typical. Can you talk a bit about the applications you deploy?
Yeah. So you're right. We are a little bit non-typical. We really didn't want to spend a lot of money on a client, one of the big box brand clients. Instead, we decided to kind of roll our own VDI, if you will. And in essence, it's just a secure shell tunnel running VNC. And that's what allowed us to connect back to our centralized servers to launch our point of sale application. And then a lot of what we developed over time was really web-based. So then we utilized the browser that was on the iGel. And then that project that I had mentioned to you just a little bit ago, where we introduced another solution that performed measurements on eyes, that solution, we sort of rolled our own client as well, if you will. And that's the luxury of this platform. The iGel platform has that capability for us to not only package something, successfully deploy it, but deploy it in a custom partition. And of course, that all went off without a hitch. So very flexible architecture.
I love it. I love it. See, this is what I think of the Agile OS. You're not using this as a thin client in the sense of what a lot of my listeners might think of a thin client, right?
Right.
You're really using it as a full-blown operating system.
Right, and I should say lightweight.
A lightweight,
yeah,
but fully functional, fully featured. It does what you want. It's not crippled, and if it is sort of crippled, it's crippled for security by your design, not by the design of the OS. Right?
You got it. I couldn't have said it better. You're absolutely right, and it's a software-defined input or software-defined device that is managed by an incredible management solution that really allows us to focus on all the other stuff that we have going on in retail. I always say to some of my technical friends, don't you hate being captive by a solution? Because this guy came in with this great sales pitch, right? And with Agile and UMS, you're not captive by that solution. You could go on to other projects that are going on in your environment and be able to extend your skills on other technology and not have to be 100% care and feeding this environment.
I love it. I love it. I love it. In fact, I've sort of been telling people for a while now. I hate the word thin client because I think of an old chunky box from 20 years ago that didn't do what we can do today, right? And but I don't know a better term. And what we sort of came up with, software-defined endpoint. And that's exactly what you just called it. It's a software-defined endpoint, and I think that separates what Agile's doing from everyone else. And I think that's the correct. I call it the modern operating system. It's the correct OS for today, right? I mean, Windows is great. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of folks that want that and need it, but then there's a lot of people that don't. And they'd be better off with an endpoint that's designed for them so they can just do their jobs like we started off this conversation with, right?
Exactly. Just the right OS. That's what I say. It's just the right OS.
Yeah.
And you're through the UMS, you're deploying exactly what needs to be on there for that associate. I'll tell you that one of my favorite sayings is, I never met a virus that didn't start on its intended target, the endpoint.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And with Agile and with it having a read-only file system, and you're controlling what functionality you're giving to that user, you're not impacted by that.
That's a question I want to ask you, because I was at IP Expo last week, and I was asked a question a couple times. What about AV? What about how do you deal with viruses? And I was like, that's a really good question. I've never really asked that question. It's Linux. And they say, yeah, but Linux is getting more market share, and they're starting to become, vulnerabilities, and people are attacking it. So I would throw that at you. How would you answer that question? What do you guys do?
Right. And that's a very good question, because early on when we adopted Linux and we actually deployed the Fat Client Linux, we always said, well, it's inherently secure. And the reason why it's inherently secure is, well, part of it is because it doesn't have a whole lot of market share, right? So there's not a lot of people that are wanting to attack it. But
Sure.
The more market share that it gets, the more people will probably want to, attack it. But here's the deal. It is an operating system that you are customizing, that you are taking away potential packages that could be exploited. So, you're already customizing the solution so it's not one OS fits all. It's not an OS that's going to sit on a hacker's desktop that has all the packages he may need to attack you. So that inherently, protects us. But then you go the extra mile of making it read-only. Obviously, if it's read-only, you can't get anything on the system. And then some of the other amazing solutions that are coming out, like Drive Lock and some others that are also, protecting from a hardware perspective as well. So, I will tell you that it just, to me, in my experience, iGel was in the front of all of this early on when I deployed, 12 or so years ago, really helping me protect my retail environment because of the read-only, lightweight, just enough OS that I put in my stores. And while, I sat and deployed the solution, I watched many other retailers getting attacked. And where did it start? It started at their endpoint in their stores. And so I'm very thankful that we really put a solid solution in that really helps protect us from that.
That's great. That's great. And 2018, like you said too, and I describe it this way all the time, is that iGel was sort of built to be secure as by design. But 2018 is definitely our year where we're really concentrating heavily on, okay, what else can we do? Where are the vulnerabilities within what we have, and how can we, so for example, we just came out with Secure Boot, which is really big, right? And we'll continue to enhance that with hardware Secure Boot and blah, 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 blah. So I think that's great. Hey, I want to change subjects a bit. And so we've been talking a lot about, we've talked about your experience with retail, working for a big company, deploying this amazing environment that you guys deployed. And now you leave this company and you go to, as you put it, the dark side. And now you're selling this solution and evangelizing this solution. Why would I get this question, Doug, why would you ever want to do that? Don't you miss deploying it? No, I don't.
Oh, yeah, it's a great question. And I'm wondering myself, no, I'm kidding. Really, to be honest, I got bored because everything's just running so well with iGel at that other company. No, I'm kidding. There's always challenges in retail, but sure. But I delivered an amazing solution, a stable, flexible, just secure solution. And I was ready to move on and I wanted to stay in retail. I was ready to move on to another retailer to do that same thing. But I in the corporate world, things move at a snail's pace. And I'm so excited to sort of, as you put it, evangelize this solution and get it into a retailer that I thought, hey, wait a second. Maybe if I jump the fence over to the quote-unquote dark side, perhaps,
you said it.
I know. Perhaps I can get in front of others, share my story, and really help retailers protect themselves and have a solid solution, and more importantly, help operations deliver what they want to deliver to that consumer, and that's their product. And so that was one of the number of reasons why I decided to hop the fence and be able to just share my experience with folks and help them really implement an amazing, solid, foundational solution in their stores, and to hopefully minimize what I hear in the news all the time, that all of a sudden there's loss of data at this retailer and somebody's hacked over in this retailer, there's a virus at this retailer. I know how important it is for them to protect themselves, and I just want to help.
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat. I love what you do, and I wish you the best of luck with that, because Although you don't need luck, I think you have the experience and the know-how behind you. So that's really phenomenal. I just absolutely love it. So, we've been talking for a long time. Let's start winding this thing down. I have a last big question for you, and I usually end up my podcast with the future. Hey, tell me about what's coming next, right? If I'm talking to an ISV or what have you. So, what do you see the future of retail? What do you see the future of IT in general? Where we're going with all this stuff?
Well, that's a great question. And you know what? The more and more retailers that I've talked to and that I've had experience with, what you're seeing from an IT perspective is they are wanting to sort of source the IT operations, and the company just wants to focus on what they do best, which is their product, and have somebody else care and feed and maintain the environment. So I see that shift, which iGel's right there already with. The iGel gateway certainly can help have a hosted environment and have managed services, manage the devices out there in the retail world or anywhere really. So that really is a positive direction in terms of retailers or others sort of moving that IT operations and the management somewhere else. The other shift that I see is, retailers moving to more of a digital unified commerce. We went from a customer coming into the store and selling at the counter, and then we went to sort of like an e-commerce where they can buy online, but they couldn't necessarily take it back in the store, or the inventory wasn't coming together from a store and e-commerce perspective. Then you're moving to a digital unified commerce where it's all going to come together. You have wish lists. They're trying to understand how you shop. They're providing what you're interested in, and trying to pull all that together. So I really see that shift as well in retail. That way, any device that the customer is on, they can buy and sell. If they're in another country and they broke, let's say glasses, for example, they can go to maybe a location if it's a global retailer, and they would be able to pull up that person's information and immediately help them out, know what they purchased, know what their, let's say, prescription is or something along those lines. So it's all about really unifying that experience for that customer. And then, of course, we're seeing a lot of these, big department stores sort of downsizing. And my thought there is, which is a little kind of off key, but still, I'm going to share it, is, they're going to naturally probably resize, their store, but let's help them reduce those costs by providing a solid solution, moving away from commodity hardware, which is going to, hit your capital expenses every, 3 years. Let's reduce their operating expenses by, again, implementing something like the iGel solution in their stores. So again, that's exciting. That's again why I sort of hopped on this side of the fence, because I see all these shifts in retail, and if I can help them sort of shift their spending somewhere else for them to be a more profitable retailer, then I'd love to help them do that.
That's excellent. I love it. I simply love it. Chantell, I simply love it. So, and I think you made me feel good about myself too, because I explain the iGel operating or the solution the way you do. I see it the way you do. And if I'm on your page, I'm on the right page, right?
Sure.
So I feel good about myself. That's great. It's a good day. I'm a good man. I'll look myself in the mirror and say that a few times.
Oh, you are a good man, Doug Brown.
Oh, it's fun. So if somebody wants to learn more about what you're doing and, keep up to date with you, are there places they can go?
Yeah, they can visit my LinkedIn profile, which of course I don't have up, and I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's Chantell Comberger.
I'll put it on in the show notes.
Perfect. You could meet me there. I'll eventually have a Twitter out there, and I'll get socially involved a little bit more. It's interesting, having been in a corporate environment. The last thing I wanted to do was really get out there socially, because I had all the folks like me now trying to come in, and so now I got to flip the switch and get myself out there socially.
The social. Welcome to the social web. It's not a very fun place. There's so much to think about the social side. There's so much good stuff, but then there's so much garbage too. So you have to weed out that. But finding someone like you to follow, is you want to do that, and then we just need good social clients, I think. And nowadays they're just prioritizing stuff, and I don't know. I've always said the money to be made is building a great Twitter client for the Mac.
Amen. That's what I'm running on.
It's amazing. I got this beautiful device, the Mac. It picks up market share. The C-level people, I guess, the important people are using it. Should I say that? No, the engineers are the important people. But you think, from a sales perspective, I guess, why not have a great Twitter client for the Mac? Even Twitter killed theirs. I couldn't believe it. I guess they don't use a Macs there. They're in San Francisco. What are they doing?
Right. I agree.
I digress. Okay, Chantell, that's it. This is the point where we stop, right? When I start digressing, we gotta stop it. So,
all right.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I've really enjoyed chatting with you and listening to your experiences, and I look forward to seeing you at Synergy too. So.
Oh, thanks, Doug. And I really appreciate your time. And I am a huge fan of yours. Keep up the awesome work.
Hey, too kind. Okay, thank you so much. And we'll call it an episode. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. As always, I want to thank my guest for today, Chantell. What do I say? Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I love what you built. I absolutely love what she built. Just great. She understands the iGel OS and the iGel platform better than anybody. She deployed it at scale. Just so every type of issue you can run into, I imagine they ran into, and they pulled it off just beautifully because they used the right solution and they deployed it the right way. I love how she thinks about it as an operating system and not just a thin client. As a software-defined endpoint. I'm speechless. I love it. So, guys, I hope you guys did too. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. Definitely head over to www.dabcc.com for the latest and greatest virtualization, cloud, software-defined endpoint news and support resources. You name it, IT news and support resources. That's what you'll find. And for sure, head over to igel.com and see what's going on over there, because we're up to something pretty darn cool. So, what else do I say except for thank you for listening to the DABCC Radio.
CC?
DABCC.
Say it again. DABCC.
DABCC.
Can you say it again? DABCC.
DABCC.
How about DABCC?
DABCC.
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 DABCC.